I want to talk to you about Sodor. Most people think Sodor is still a part of the British Empire, but Sodor has been its own country since it declared independence in the 30s. Which begs the question, why did Sodor go to war with the Axis powers and stood by its old owner Britain? It's simple really. Sodor joined the Second World War on April 4th, 1940 after a German U-boat sunk a Sodor passenger boat named the Farkli Ye Degen, which means the Devil's Sea in Sudrick, that was heading towards New York in America. 236 men, women and children were brutally killed in this selfless act, and the people of the Sudrick land were livid, and the Prime Minister at the time, William Gwinnett Clark, signed a treaty for war on April 12th of the same year. It, along with Britain, France, and the newly formed Soviet Union, and later on, US, they began to find tactics to bring the Nazi-infested country to its knees. This is the story of men, women, and engines working in these difficult times, and how they prospered from a terrible tragedy. From the narrator, Wilbert Audrey. When Thomas arrived at the top station, the fat controller was standing on the platform, waiting for him. Good afternoon, Thomas. I've been waiting for you. Good afternoon, sir. Now, Percy has a jam cylinder and has to be sent to the works. I need you to shunt until Percy comes back tomorrow. But what about my passengers? Since Clive is coming from the works, he will look after your trains until you get back. Yes, sir, said Thomas, reluctantly. That's all the work done. We can rest easy for another hour or two before we arrange another train. Whew. God, I am exhausted. I can tell. Huh? Oh, I'm so sorry if I startled you. I just saw you shunting and I had to see you. Who are you, if you don't mind me asking? My name is the Reverend Wilbert Audrey, but you can call me Wilbert. And your name is? Thomas. Oh yeah, I've heard of you. You're that new reverend at the Wellsworth Church, aren't you? Yes, how did you know? This lady called Mrs. Kindly told me about you. Ah yes, Me and her are good friends. She loves this railway, and she hasn't even been here for a month. do you want me to tell you a story about when she saved me from a nasty accident? Yes, please, if you don't mind me asking. Right then, this is what happened on November 3rd of 1938. It had been raining for days, weeks even. I was in the yard with this engine called Thomas! Yes, Henry? Was my local passenger train on platform 2 where I left it. Good, and stop talking to strangers on the job. You're here to shunt for us, remember? Yes, because you won't shunt because you're lazy. Now be off with you. I want to tell stories on my break. Whoosh! I'm sorry about him. After his rebuild, he started to act more pompous like our number 4, Gordon. I see. Speaking of Henry, I remember this one time he got stuck in the tunnel because he didn't want to spoil his lovely green paint with red stripes. Ah, do tell. Henry was a completely different engine from the way he is now. He was shy and timid. Of course, after his rebuild, that all changed. A rebuild? Yes, in 1938 we were nervous because we didn't know if the Fat Controller had enough money to repair him. Luckily, he did. I see. Well, I got to get going on the 515, which is pulled by your number 4, Gordon. Goodbye. Bye. When Thomas arrived at the sheds, he talked endlessly about Wilbert. Most of the other engines weren't amused. Why should we care so much about this man? He's more of a trespasser than a reverend. Oh, be quiet, the lot of you. I'm trying to get some sleep. Agreed. We have important jobs to do, and little Thomas has to arrange our trains. Just then, Percy came huffing in. Guys, they fixed my cylinder in record time. Good, that means I can go back to my branch line. Not yet. The Fat Controller told me that I have to run the yards at night for jocks. It's going to be very busy. But why? Because we're getting more ammunition and we're going to help supply the war. For how long? Not very long, until the new engine arrives. New engine? Yeah, the Fat Controller bought a new tank engine. Oh great, another tank engine to get in the way. Stuff and nonsense. Any engine is a useful engine. Exactly. But when is it going to come? Maybe after 2 or 3 days. Anyways, I got to get to the docks. Night all. Good. Now I'm gonna go and get some sleep, and I hope you two can settle your little differences just for tonight. Thank you very much. For the next few days, Thomas kept getting visited by Wilbert more and more frequently, and he talked about his and his friends' adventures. And soon, Wilbert started writing down the stories in a little notebook. The Fat Controller asked if Wilbert wanted to work as a cleaner. He did, so we could hear more and more of Thomas's stories. Meanwhile, Percy was told by the Fat Controller to collect troops and take them to the docks. When Percy arrived at Vickerstown, another engine brought the troops from the mainland. He had 6 more wheels, sloping side tanks, and had the letters G and R on his tanks. "Hello there." "Good morning," the engine said back. "Do you know when Knapford Dock is?" "Yes, I'm going back that way myself." "You must be the new engine, I believe." "Yes, indeed. My name is Simon, and you are?" "Percy. It's very nice to meet you. I'll guide you there." The guard blew his whistle. "Ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." And the train started to move, slowly at first, then faster and faster. "Your railway looks splendid." "Thank you." "I wish the robbers at home looked just like this." "Where do you live?" "Doncaster mainly. I'm usually the shunter, but I had to take hospital trains and goods. Mainly guns and ammunition, but fish trains are food for the troops, but even those are handled with great care." "Well, you'll get used to the docks then," Percy said, as they charged ahead. "Here we are," Percy said. Just then a man went out of one of the coaches and walked up to the 2 tank engines. "Good morning, I am Sergeant Benton and I work for the naval base here on Sodor." "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." "Now who runs this dockyard?" "Me, sir." "What's your name, Private?" "Simon, sir." "Well, Simon, you will be kept very busy by the goods and troops coming around here. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir, but it's my first day here, sir." He turned to Percy. "Percy, if you could show Simon how to shunt trucks here, that would be greatly appreciated." "Yes, sir, I'll show him what I know." "Very good," he said. He turned back at the 2 tank engines. "Your country will thank the both of you." "Little engines can do big things after all," Percy said, and he and Simon shunted the empty coaches away. At Tidmouth, Henry was getting ready to pull another troop train. Thomas, meanwhile, was in the sheds. His fireman called ill and the relief fireman was yet to turn up. "Ha ha," said Henry. "It's a pity you can't go anywhere. I wonder who will shunt the trucks." Henry was still chortling when he puffed away. But trouble soon emerged. The sleepers were old and rotten and couldn't handle Henry's weight. Soon, Henry veered off the rails. "Ah! Oh dear!" said Henry. Luckily, he wasn't hurt, but all of his wheels came off except for his tender, and it would be a long time before Henry could go back on the rails. A few minutes later, Wilbert came with a bucket of water and a rag to clean the engines, but saw Thomas had stayed in the sheds. He went over to talk to Thomas. "Hey Keith, where's Evan? He called in sick, and the relief is running late." "Well, I can help. I went to so many industrial and preserve lines, and fired, and even drove the engines. Well, it's better if we ask the Fat Controller first." Keith went inside the hut, and came back looking excited. "What did he say?" "He said it's fine, just get a shovel and we'll be on our way." Thomas and Wilbert were confused. "Where?" "You know that troop train Henry was supposed to take to Knapford Harbour? Since no one can be spared, we will take the train." Thomas was thrilled. "Come on, let's go." "Bye-bye, Henry," said Thomas, laughing. Henry just sulked. Thomas arrived at the docks in record time. Sergeant Benton was very pleased. Thank you, Thomas, for delivering the troops. No problem, sir. Now go to the sheds. You must be tired. Thomas hated to admit it, but he was very worn out, as it was a non-stop run. He puffed into a shed near to the yards. He just closed his eyes when Winston came puffing in with some empty vans. Oh, hello, Thomas. Hello, Winston. How are things? Going well. Winston worked on the Wellsworth and Sudbury branch line with Colin, Adam and Lily before it officially became Edward's branch. Since they had their own harbour, it was rare for them to go on any parts of the island. Thomas looked at the vans. What are these vans for? He asked. It was Sergeant Benton who answered. They are for taking more fish on the flying kipper, as we need to feed the troops as well as the entire island. But since the train is already long, it will be divided in half and depart an hour apart. I see. But Henry can't do it. He derailed a couple of hours ago. Well, Winston can handle Henry's lot, and Thomas, can you help take Winston's lot? It's not that long. Yes, sir, said Thomas eagerly. Good. I'll tell the Fat Controller and the signalman the timetables. You and Winston will wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Winston will take his lot through regularly. As for you, Thomas, you will take your train straight to Barrow and Furnace. Sounds good? Sir, yes, sir. Soon the engines backed down into the sheds and fell asleep. Thomas? Thomas? Thomas! Come on, Winston just left with some of the kipper. Now we have to take the rest. Alright, Keith, don't fuss. Thomas's fire was lit, and he went out to find his train. He found Simon shunting. Hello. I'm looking for my train. Hello. You must be Thomas. Your train is over there. You'll have to wait though. I have to shunt these fuel tankers in front. Why? They were taking off James's goods train because there were sightings of a German fighter plane. Since the fuel was highly flammable, it was left here just in case the plane blew it up. Some planes need it on the mainland though, and your train goes to the same base. Well, alright. Just hurry up please, I'm gonna be late. Soon Simon shunted the tankers onto the train. There you go. Now be careful, you hear? That German Spitfire might be out there, and you might be its next victim if you're not careful. Don't worry, I'll be as careful as I can. If it does come for you, Thomas, run to the nearest tunnel. You'll be safe there. Well, until help comes. Alright, thanks, Simon. And Thomas puffed away, leaving a worried Simon behind.
Wilbert? Yes, Thomas? You think we will run into that fighter plane that Simon was talking about? I doubt it, but we best keep a good eye out. Thomas made good time when he reached Wellsworth. While he was waiting for a banker, a man in a soldier's uniform came running up, panting. Excuse me, I just missed the bus, and I have to go to the airfield on the mainland. We're going there as well. You can hitch a ride in my cab. Thank you. That is very much appreciated. I'm Joe, by the way. I'm in the Navy. I was just visiting my friends here, and then I got the call to go to the airfield. Do you know anyone else in the armed forces? Oh, lots. But one that comes to mind is my brother Jack. He's in the Navy too, but he works as a lieutenant of a torpedo boat in the South Pacific. Thomas was going to ask another question when the guard blew his whistle. You better climb on, sir. Rightio. Lily blew her whistle. Are you ready? Yes, I am. And with Lily pushing from the back and Thomas snorting in the front, they moved off, tackling the big hill and beyond. Since Lily was pushing and not actually coupled to the train, by the time they reached the top, Lily had slowed down and soon puffed back to Wellsworth, leaving the engine and the train on its own. But they wouldn't be for long. As they passed Reverends gate, there was an ominous buzzing in the sky. It got louder and louder and louder. What was that? Thomas shrieked. Probably one of our planes patrolling the line from the sky. No German would dare hurt us on our own territory. He turned to Joe and Wilbert for support, and Joe turned pale. I've been working in the Navy for 5 years. And believe me, none of our planes sound like that. Joe took out his binoculars and looked out the cab. And unfortunately, his fears were justified. For there, flying through the dark sky, was a Nazi Messerschmitt. Keith pulled Thomas's throttle all the way down while Wilbert was shoveling for dear life. The plane responded with a will, shooting bullets but narrowly missing the train and the fuel tankers. Thomas was panting. You can't outrun it, Thomas wailed. He thought his sidewalls were about to come loose. Then Thomas remembered.
If it does come for you, Thomas, run to the nearest tunnel. You'll be safe there. Well, until help comes.
Henry's tunnel! What? We can stop in the tunnel!
Excellent idea.
When does it come? Maybe a mile or two. Thomas slowed into the tunnel and waited for the plane to pass. Thomas's fire was put out. Thomas, Wilbert, Keith and Joe listened and waited for the buzzing to get quieter and quieter until it had completely gone away. Joe walked out and told the signalman what happened, and a resident Ginty pulled them off to Barrow. Since they found the train was already behind schedule, they decided to pull Thomas along. Sooner or later, they arrived at Barrow. An ATEF was standing on the other platform, waiting for him. And what kept you? We ran into an enemy plane, so we hid in the tunnel. And Thomas soon explained everything. When he had finished, the ATEF changed its tune. Well, that's understandable. Thomas's fire was relit, and he was about to set off when Joe walked back up beside him. You were splendid, and if it wasn't for your quick thinking, we could have been dead by now. Thank you, Thomas. Then a train came into the station. Looks like my ride is here. So long, Thomas, Keith, and Wilbert. I appreciate the thrill. He chuckled, and Joe walked off contentedly. Nobody knew that he would die a few months later. Also, that his brother would soon become the 35th President of the United States. Thomas arrived home later on that day, where he saw Gordon, Henry, and James arguing with Edward. I will most certainly not take goods on the express. Only branch line engines do that. This is the main line. We don't pull mixed trains. The only trucks we have on our trains that are acceptable are luggage vans. But putting dirty trucks on our prestigious passenger trains, it's disgraceful, disgusting, despicable. What's going on? Whispered Thomas to Winston. They're refusing to pull mixed trains. I heard you got into trouble with the German kite, eh? Thomas told Winston everything. It's a good thing you listened to Simon's advice, or goodness knows where you could have ended up. Listen, Gordon, I would have accepted this if we weren't in war right now. But you're acting all pompous and ridiculous. This is war times. We have to make the good out of every bad situation. That's quite right, Edward. All the engines turned and saw the fat director looking confused. Now what seems to be the problem here? Well, sir, I refuse to take mixed trains. I believe they should stay apart. I have my reasons. We need to shorten the schedule and make you lot have a rest, the fat director explained. But you won't have to deal with mixed trains. Gordon perked up. Good, sir. I'm glad you stand with my reasoning. Indeed. Tomorrow, you will just be taking a goods train filled with ammunition to Ballyhoo Yards. Gordon spluttered. But sir, I can't. The rails can't hold engines like me and Henry. Don't worry, they have been reinforced so we can hold you and your heavy train. But that's settled then. Winston, I want to have a word with you. Yes, sir. The base in the mainland needs an engine to take troops and ammunition trains to and from the base. I have chosen you because I can trust you with that, and I believe you can get it done. Don't worry about your branch. Edward will look after it until you get back. Yes, sir. What time do I leave? First thing in the morning. He turned to Edward. The engines on the line will tell you what to do. You can do it. I know you will. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Then, finally, he walked up to Thomas. Thomas, thank you for your help for the past few weeks. But now, your branch line is waiting for you. Percy will sometimes take stone from the quarry, so you might see him often. Thomas was happy. He missed Annie and Clarabelle, and he couldn't wait to go back on his branch. The falcon shoulder turned on his heel and left. As he did, Gordon started complaining again. I'm a mainline engine. I don't go on branch lines. Why do I have to take those trains? Any engine could do it. But he chose you, Henry chuckled. Winston was more worried. I'd take great care if I were you. Why? The line has some supernatural occurrences. I haven't told you this, I believe. You told me when I was stuck in the shed, remember? Oh, yeah. Well, do you lot want to hear it? Ghosts don't exist, Winston, but since it's your last day, you might as well tell us anyway. Right. This is what happened on June 16th, 1914. After the three railway companies had merged into the North Western Railway, only one standard gauge line wasn't accounted for. The Ballyhoo line. Well, it wasn't really a line, it was more or less a private railway. It was owned by Lord and Lady Fenric. There was only one engine on the small line. His name was Stuart, after the Lord's father. He went up and down the little line every day, but on July 28, war had broken out, and immediately the Lord and Lady were forced to leave as the manor house was used as a hospital for injured soldiers. As for Stuart, he was now owned by the railway as a shunter, and also had to take goods and ammunition through his old line and deliver it through the base, set up on the other side of the branch line. His attitude towards the trucks, coaches and even the engines was rather rude and intolerant, as I remember. We tried to warn him, be careful how you treat those trucks, if one goes up they all go up. But he didn't pay any mind. He thought that we were old and useless. But one day, there was heavy mist and rain. Stuart didn't want to go out, but he had to deliver his train, so he puffed off, banging the trucks as usual. His ex-owner, meanwhile, was walking back from the manor. He tried to create a lawsuit so he could get his manor back, but it was no use. He waited for the suburban train, frustrated, but suddenly he slipped up from the rain and he fell on the track. Once he got up, the rails began to vibrate as an engine approached. Stuart couldn't see his owner, and the owner couldn't see Stuart. And then what? Stuart killed him. At first they thought it was a deer on the track, but then they saw their owner's favourite bowler hat and shreds of his tailor suit. The people refused to ride the death engine, so the Fat Controller was forced to scrap him. Since it happened in war times, the murder and scrapping were covered up. But the curse of Fenric's ghost still haunts the line to this day, whose whistle will echo through the valley, and would seek revenge on the railway and the entire island. All the engines were left in shock and silence, except Gordon. That's hogwash. Ghosts don't exist. But all the same, the engine stayed respectfully quiet all night. Dawn broke over the sheds, as Winston was coupled up to a brake van. Gordon was trying to sleep when Winston made his little speech. You lots have learned a lot from me, especially Edward and my dear brother James. I hope when I come back I'll have more stories to tell. But for now, you lot keep your chin up, wheels on the rails, and keep persevering until the war is won. The engine blew their whistles, and Winston puffed out of Tidmouth for the last time, with the lamp placed in the middle of his buffer beam. This is called a light engine move, which means there is no train, just the engine and occasionally a brake van or two. It helps the signalman understand where the train is supposed to go at what time. This method is a success, as no matter how rainy, foggy, dark or snowy, the lamps are still visible, which makes the signalman's job much easier. Gordon was glad that the whistling had subsided, and he went grumpily back to sleep. But he wouldn't sleep for long. Come on, Gordon, we have to take the munitions train from the docks and deliver it to the marshalling yards at Ballyhoo. Gordon groaned and puffed away. And soon he arrived at the docks. Simon was there taking on water. Hello there. Gordon stayed stone-faced and remained silent. Not really much of a talker, are you? Simon sighed. But anyways, your train is right behind you. Gordon didn't say a word as he coupled up to the train and fumed away with the trucks rattling behind. Dirty trucks, grumbled Gordon. How undignified. When he was on the Ballyhoo line, he had to go slow because the odds of him coming off the rails were 50-50. He wanted to go fast, but his driver wouldn't let him. Be careful, Gordon. You don't want to pull a stunt like Henry did, do you? Gordon harumphed and kept going. When he arrived at the yards, Lily was waiting for him. "Hello, Gordon," she said. "Good morning," Gordon replied back. "I arranged your ammunition train. It's over by the carriage shed." Gordon looked at the train like he tasted something sour. He was thinking of his coaches and why James was pulling it instead of him. He was so lost in thought that he didn't pay attention to Lily's advice about handling the long goods train. "It's really heavy, so be careful coming down the big hill by Wellsworth, because the only thing that can stop you is your own brakes, and the guard with his brake van. You got that, Gordon?" "Gordon? Yes." "Did you hear what I said about the non-fitted goods trains?" "Yes, quite." "Well, you better hurry up, then. Sergeant Benton needs this train ASAP." Of course, Gordon didn't pay any attention to the tank engine. He just said yes so he could get the train over and done with, but it would have been better if he had. When he was coupled up to the wagons, Gordon heard a whistle that seemed vaguely familiar. He was still thinking of the whistle when the guard blew his whistle. Gordon was shuffling away with the trucks. He saw, just by the station, a B-12. His face turned from a sour to a scowl, and he charged away with the heavy goods train. He stayed like that until he reached the hill. Most people think that Gordon's Hill was named after Gordon because he couldn't pull a goods train and Edward had to help. But the situation was also bigger than that. The hill was built differently than others on the railway. It only had one way up and one way down, like some stairs. And at the top of the hill was a station called Marin. Gordon had to go down the hill so he could reach the docks. He was puffing fast so he could get the train done with. But when he reached the hill, he forgot to slow down. The buffers of the trucks clanged together. Gordon tried to brake, but it was too late. Gravity had already taken its course and made the already fast train even faster. Gordon blew his whistle. "Help! Save me!" he wailed. Then his wheel suddenly bumped and lurched off the rails, and he landed in a field, looking surprised and leaking steam in all directions. Luckily, the driver and fireman as well as the guard only had minor injuries. "You daft engine, how could you be so foolish?" this fireman rapped. "You're lucky none of the vans exploded because of your stupid nature." Gordon looked at his buffers. The B-12 from before brought the breakdown crane and a very, very cross fat director. He had a short, but not so sweet talk with Gordon, and the fat director told off the crew for not keeping their engine under control. The goods were fine, but some of the wagons took quite a beating. Gordon was hauled by the B-12 to Crovan's Gate. Neither one of them said a word. Gordon was eventually dumped at the works. He was thinking long and hard. He felt very foolish over his behavior with the trucks. Then he didn't take Lily's advice about handling the train. If he would have listened, he would have been at the sheds. Not here. The cold, empty works with only 2 or 3 workmen around. But then that engine, that B-12 he thought so long and hard about, was vaguely familiar. But he couldn't put his buffer on it. He yawned and decided to deal with the B-12 in the morning. Then he shut his tired eyes and drifted off to sleep. Everywhere was silent, except for the docks, which had ships coming in 24/7, 7 days a week. On that particular night, a shipment of copper and metals were vital to make more machines at Barrow. but Nazi spies were ready to steal it and try to stop the building of the machine. While no one was looking, they crept into the yard.
Komm schon, ich komme. Puh, was ist das für ein lustiger Geruch? Deine Mutter. Jetzt hilft mir das in den Fang.
They stole metals, and they loaded it into the vans and drove away into the night. Luckily, Simon was on his break. He saw everything while his driver went to the toilet. He knew that the medals were supposed to go on a train to the other railway. He also knew that they were very important for winning the war. When he came back, Simon said frantically, "Someone just stole the metals and put it in a van. We must stop them, we must." Since the road was close to the railway, it was easy to know where they were. The driver eased Simon's regulator and the tank engine moved out of the docks. The driver of the lorry, however, didn't have much luck. There was a creaking noise from the lorry as it struggled to hold the heavy precious metals inside. He had to start the lorry 3 times. Soon there was a splutter and the lorry broke down right beside the railway line, not far from the docks. They managed to get out when Simon bustled up.
You're surrounded. Don't move.
The thieves put their hands up and were quickly taken back to the docks where they were promptly arrested.
At the sheds, meanwhile, there was a shrill whistle that cut through the sky. The engines jumped. Oh, who could that be at this time of the morning? James grumbled. Then, there it was. A green tender appeared, backing towards them. Attached was a green engine. He stopped in the shed, and the factory director introduced him. This is Alfred. He will help with taking Gaunt's trains and Winston's when Gordon comes back. James looked confused. What happened to Gordon? I'll explain later, the fat controller said. Henry, your driver, phoned in early, and he told me that he is ill, and he won't get better until Wednesday. So I've got you a relief driver. Really, sir? Who is it? It'll be that chipper fellow, Wilbert. Henry's mouth was agape. But, sir! No excuses, Henry. That train is important, and I need to reach the mainland right away. I've already had reports that 2 men tried to steal it this morning. The engines were shocked. Speaking of which, I've got to go to the docks right away. The fat director spun on his heel and dashed for his car. The engines stared at Alfred. There was an awkward silence in the air until Edward spoke.
It's nice to see you again, Alfred,
Edward said warmly.
How did the mainland treat you?
Alfred faltered before he said something. Well, it was good and all. I even got this new livery. But all the same, I'm happy to be back on Sodor again. Percy and James looked rather confused. What do you mean, again? Alfred turned to James. You should know, mate. He broke off when he realised it wasn't Winston. Oh, sorry. I thought you were Winston. He went to that base on the mainland. They should be arriving after a few weeks. Alfred didn't say a word. He just turned to Edward, looking worried. Edward reassured him.
Don't worry, I keep in touch with him by letter.
No, I see. Where are the coaches that I'm supposed to take on my stopping train?
They're on that siding over there.
Cheers. Alright, goodbye all. Long after the engines went to start work, Henry was still in the sheds, waiting for Wilbert. He was not at all happy. Good morning, Henry, said Wilbert. Henry looked away. Morning, he replied suspiciously. Right. Cameron is getting the lamps for our local goods train to Euston, on the mainland. The train was shunted by Edward before he went to Wellsworth. Henry listened, but still had a careful look on his face. When Cameron finally arrived, they collected the goods train from the sidings. The headlamps were adjusted on Henry's front.
The guard blew his whistle, and Henry responded with a wheel. Wheels slipping, side rods aching, he finally pulled off with the train. He thundered down the line, steam escaping from his cylinders. He went down the line faster and faster. "Whoa, Henry!" called Wilbert. "You're gonna break something going at this speed." Wilbert was right. The lamps on Henry began to shudder and shake. Then there was a clang. Cameron and Henry didn't take any notice, but Wilbert had. He was hoping it wasn't what he thought it was. But his suspicions proved correct as Henry was halted at Lower Natford. The station master walked up looking flustered. "What do you think you're playing at, driver? What do you think you're playing at? Putting a halt on a non-stop express goods train is against railway regulations." "If you're an express goods train, why do you have the branch line head code then, Wilbert turned back round, and an awful thought hit him hard. He saw, then, that there was one lamp on Henry signifying that he was a branch line train instead of a goods express. He turned back to the station master. "Do you have any lamps here?" he said. "Yeah, I have some in my office." "While I get it, you fireman, you need to tell the signalman about what happened." And before he could say "fat director," Cameron and the station master sprinted away. Wilbert was not happy at all. "Now, Henry, I know this was not your fault, but you have to slow down and stop hurrying. I told you were going to break something, and you did, so for goodness sake be careful. We have ammunition on this train, and we don't want to end up like Gordon did, do we?" Henry sighed. "I guess you're right. Maybe I have been a little over the bearings. Sorry, Wilbert." And knowing that Henry was truly sorry, Wilbert gave him a little smile. "It's alright, Henry, but we need to take this train away ASAP." The station master arrived with the lamp, and Wilbert fitted it on and made sure the other one was secure. Then, when Cameron returned, they rolled cautiously away. They reached Natford Junction, where Thomas was waiting with Annie and Clarabelle. "Hello, Henry. I heard about the mishap with the lamps and—" "It's not true," chuckled Wilbert. "We had to add more vans onto the train." "Oh, well, alrighty then. Sorry, Henry." Wilbert gave a wink, and Henry just smiled back at him. Then the signal dropped, and Henry pulled away, and they made their long journey to Euston. And from that day on, Henry and Wilbert have been firm friends ever since.